This is for Palestine, Ramallah, West Bank, Gaza. This is for the child that is searching for an answer. This is not just a war over stolen land. Why do you think little boys are throwing stones at tanks? And we'll never really know how many people are dead. They drop bombs on innocent girls while they sleep in their bed. Israel is a terror state, they're terrorists that terrorize. I'll testify my television, televise them telling lies. How many more resolutions have to be violated? How many more children have to be annihilated? This is not a war, it is systematic genocide. But whatever they try, Palestine will never die. Free, free Palestine, free, free Palestine, free, free Palestine, free, free Palestine.
Hello, I'm Chris Williamson, and this is Palestine Declassified. We're continuing to broadcast about the ongoing struggle to liberate Palestine, despite the British Home Office trying to gag us by misusing the National Security Act. And we won't stop exposing the Zionist regime either. The owner of the studio where we previously recorded the show was threatened with possible legal action by the Home Office and imprisonment for up to 5 years for allowing us to film there. But we refused to be silenced. And as you can see, we've found an alternative way to keep going. So in this week's episode of Palestine Declassified, we'll be focusing on the latest murderous actions of the Zionist regime as they pursue their ambition to create a greater Israel by yet again invading Lebanon. The Zionist colonies repeatedly rained down death and destruction on the Lebanese people ever since the late 1970s, and has tried to occupy the country on several different occasions. The original pretext for these incursions was to attack and neutralize the Palestine Liberation Organization that was led by Yasser Arafat, who had bases in South Lebanon. But although the Zionists occupied South Lebanon for 18 years from 1982, they've singularly failed to destroy the movement to liberate Palestine. And Hezbollah's sustained guerrilla campaign against the Israeli occupation forces throughout the 1980s and 1990s brought the occupation to an end in the year 2000. And in the last 26 years, there have been frequent exchanges between the Zionists and Hezbollah, including Israel's indiscriminate and brutal pager attacks in September 2024. But Israel's now attempting to go much further, and it's trying to replicate its genocidal rampage through Gaza in South Lebanon. So joining me to discuss what's been happening is the fearless and principled journalist Steve Sweeney, who's been reporting from Lebanon's front line, and it's an absolute privilege to have him on the show today. I'm also joined, as usual, by our resident expert David Miller, who's the UK's leading scholarly critic of Israel. Steve's an award-winning war correspondent who's known for reporting from the ground and providing first-hand accounts of conflict situations. He narrowly escaped a targeted missile attack by the Israel occupation forces just a few weeks ago. He combines investigative journalism with advocacy in order to expose injustices and amplify the voices of those affected by the war and political oppression. And David is a co-director of the lobby watchdog Spinwatch and a senior research fellow at the Centre for Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Zayim University. Welcome to the show. Well, firstly, let me express solidarity with you, Steve. As I was saying in the introduction just there, you survived a recent assassination attempt in Lebanon by the Israeli military while you were doing a piece to camera. So obviously it's been recorded for posterity. So it's fantastic that you've been able to join us on the show today. Now then, Steve, Israel's invaded Lebanon on multiple occasions in the last 50 years, as I was just saying there, but this feels different because this time they're engaged in a blatant campaign of ethnic cleansing. I mean, does it feel materially different to you?
Well, I'm glad that you use that term ethnic cleansing, because this is describes exactly what's happening now in Lebanon. Now, we don't say that there's a new war because it's simply an escalation of the Israeli aggression, which started on March the 2nd. We woke up to the sounds of somewhere between 8 or 10 bombs falling in the southern suburbs of Beirut. But obviously then things started to escalate. Not only was it targeting the capital, the war never left the south of Lebanon. We talk about a ceasefire back in November 2024. This was after the 66-day war. You described the pager attacks, the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah Secretary General, and the kind of attempted incursions into the south. Now, this time, what we saw was the evacuation orders that were issued for that entire area south of the Litani River. Now, for your viewers, this is the area that's about 20 kilometers from the border with occupied Palestine, as it's called in Lebanon. So this was a huge area, and they essentially said that they were going to turn the south of Lebanon into Khan Yunis. Well, actually, Khan Yunis was the term used for the southern suburbs of Beirut. They said Beit Hanun and Rafah for the south of Lebanon. And Israel Katz, the defense minister, simply said that we're going to destroy all of those, what he described as, I think, frontline villages, that he called them. But these are not simply places on a map. These are people's homes. These are the places that families have lived for generations, and they have a deep connection to their land. So they were forced off their land. Now we're talking internally displaced 1.2 million people. I mean, it's a staggering amount. Lebanon, you'll remember, is a very, very small country. So we're talking around 20% of the population has been displaced. And like I said, the war never left the south. In between that period of the ceasefire in November 2024 and March the 2nd, Israel had breached it more than 15,000 times. Now, that's according to the United Nations. So, they've been on the ground there documenting the violations. This is probably like a conservative estimate, if anything. And there was one breach of the ceasefire from the Lebanese side. We believe it was an accidental retaliatory strike or something. We're not entirely sure what happened, but one in December 2024. So we talk about it in those terms, ethnic cleansing, because the majority of the population in the south of the country are Shia Muslim. So this is the main target of the Israeli aggression, whether it's in the south of the country, whether it's in the southern suburbs of Beirut. Now we hear the Western journalists who have reappeared in the country as the white saviors since March the 2nd, but they use the terminology Hezbollah stronghold to describe Dahia. And essentially that language is very carefully chosen to justify the bombing and the killing of the people that live there, because it's a Hezbollah stronghold. They use the exact same terminology in the south of the country. You remember in the 80s and 90s it was Fatahland. They called it Fatahland after the PLO had some bases there. Now they call it Hezbollah land, which is essentially, again, language deliberately chosen to justify the attacks on that part of the country. But this is a war not just on we say that the Shia community are the main targets, but this is a war against all of Lebanon. Now, again, the terms that we use, what Israel is carrying out now is a new Nakba. This is a Nakba, an ethnic cleansing operation on a scale even bigger than the Nakba, actually, when you look at it in those terms. So, yes, this is an ethnic cleansing operation being carried out by Israel, armed to the teeth with the most advanced military technology, armed to the teeth with the most advanced surveillance technology, by the most powerful states in the world. And that's the only way that they can do this. Without the support of the United States and the Western powers, Israel would collapse within a week.
Yes, and David, Steve sort of set out really there a kind of really kind of woeful tale, hasn't he, of kind of complicity and so on, which we've often spoken about on Palestine Declassified. But we've seen, haven't we, though, just in terms of how the big tech companies have operated. I mean, Apple Maps, for example, has removed the names of South Lebanese villages, and Google Maps has started removing them too. I mean, this is yet more evidence, isn't it, David, of complicity, of the complicity of big tech companies in genocide.
Well, yes. I mean, we've already seen, we discussed this in the previous program, that the Iranians attacked Amazon Web Services depots and data hubs across the Gulf very early on in the beginning of this response to the aggression by the US and the Zionists. And they then, of course, the IRGC then issued a list of tech companies who would be targeted across the whole of the region. And there are something like 30 different data hubs, data centers across the region, including in occupied Palestine, run by these companies, and of course they're all directly complicit, not just in the attack on Iran, but also in surveilling and genocide against the Palestinians, and indeed, of course, against the Lebanese and Shia in Lebanon. And so, I mean, Google and Apple are deeply up to the necks in this. I mean, I was just doing a little look at this the other day, and it turns out that there are hundreds and hundreds of former IDF and especially Unit A200, the Zionist intelligence organization. Hundreds of these people high up in the hierarchy and the power structures of all of these firms, of Google, Palantir, of X. Just extraordinary. And of course, that's part of the strategy of the Zionists has been to, and they have this thing, don't they, this propaganda term, the startup nation, as if they came to an empty land without people. They created blooms in the desert and world-leading tech firms in a country the size of the Netherlands or something. But actually, of course, it's been a conscious foreign policy strategy to set up these tech firms and then to use them to infiltrate and surveil. And of course, they sell their surveillance technology across the world to repressive regimes everywhere, including, of course, to the US. All of these, of course, have backdoors to allow the Mossad or Unit 200 to use the surveillance which is being used by the Glasgow police or the FBI for the purposes of pursuing Zionist interests, and indeed, of course, the greater Israel and beyond.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, I mean, as you say, you've been in Lebanon, reporting directly from the front line there. I just wonder what your thoughts are about Lebanon's Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam. I mean, he's made some crass statements, hasn't he? Like the Zionists don't fire missiles without a reason. I mean, people are beginning to compare him to Mahmoud Abbas, the Zionist puppet president of Palestine. I mean, is that a fair and accurate comparison, in your opinion?
I can see why people are making that comparison with Nawaf Salam and Abbas. Now, there's a general feeling here that that you have to remember that Nawaf Salam, he wasn't elected prime minister. That's not how it works in Lebanon. He was appointed prime minister, and Lebanon had been without a government for just around 3 years when Joseph Aoun, who was the former head of the army, he became the president, and Nawaf Salam became prime minister. Before he was prime minister, he was the head of the ICJ. Now, he was removed as the head of the ICJ when he became prime minister, and people are starting to join the dots that this is part of a broader plan, that Salam is removed as the head of the ICJ at a time when the ICJ is investigating war crimes committed by Israel in Gaza. And he was replaced by the Ugandan judge, who is the only pro-Israel judge that was part of the ICJ. So she then takes that position at a critical time, in terms of any action against Israel for its for the war crimes it's committed in Gaza. Salam then comes into Lebanon. His first actions as prime minister have been to move to disarm the resistance, to disarm Hezbollah, and secondly, as we're seeing now, and people have predicted this almost as soon as he took up his post, that he's now entering negotiations with Israel. And, this would have been utterly unthinkable, even just weeks ago, actually, to talk about normalization with Israel. So we're starting to see now, because Salam and Aoun both owe their power to Washington. They're very pro the United States, so their power comes from outside. Their power rests with so squarely with Washington. So they were sent there. They were appointed to those posts at the behest of the United States, and to carry out the mission, which is going to be, we think, these plans to normalize relations with Israel. Now, for the Lebanese people, this is simply unpalatable. There isn't support for normalization with Israel. Okay, peace might be another thing. They want Israel to stop bombing them and to stop killing them, to stop trying to invade and steal their land. That's what they want. They don't want. I mean, you can't really have normalization with Israel. I mean, it showed that time and time and time again. So we're starting to see now starting on Friday, actually, well, Thursday and Friday, these demonstrations that started in the capital, Beirut. Now they're growing, and the chants, or one of the most popular chants at those demonstrations, is Nawaf Salam, or Nawaf Shalom, as some people call him, Nawaf Salam, Zionist. So, this isn't going to be an accepted, I don't think, by the Lebanese people. His role, you'll recall, back in 1983, there was a similar attempt at entering negotiations or a peace deal or some kind of agreement with Israel. And of course, it didn't work, and it collapsed the government. And I think we could see something very similar happening here. I mean, the timing of the peace talks, it came a day after it was announced, the day after Israel launched this blitzkrieg across the country, 100 strikes in 10 minutes. I was again caught up in the middle of this in Beirut. I had a blast one side of me. I kind of walked away. Then there was a blast the other side of me, and they just rained down hell across across Beirut, outside of what we would say the normal target area. More than 300 people killed. That day started actually with a massacre of 8 people in a cafe in Sidon, Saida, in the gateway to the south. Then there were 4 emergency workers killed after an ambulance was targeted in Tyre district. And then 10 people were killed after Israel struck a funeral in Bekaa in the east of the country. And then in the afternoon, around 2 p.m., they started bombing Beirut. So people were a little shocked to hear the very next day that the Lebanese cabinet, the Lebanese government, because I don't think we can say the Lebanese government, actually, will say that the Prime Minister Salam and some representatives were going to negotiate with the people that had just carried out this act of terror. And
incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. It truly is. But David, I mean, we know, don't we, that the recent ceasefire, so-called, between Iran and US was supposed to include Lebanon. So why do you think that part of the agreement wasn't honoured? We just heard Steve talking about them raining down hell. I mean, was it 100 missiles in 10 minutes? Incredible. What's going on?
Well, the reason is there was no agreement. It's not just that there was no agreement in the sense that it was violated by the Zionists, which of course it was, but that the agreement wasn't written down. There was a series of meeting minutes and text messages, and indeed some posts on X exchanged between Witkoff and Archie, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic, and there was no written down agreement. In fact, it's also said that the 10-point agreement, which was allegedly given to the Americans, was not the same as the one which was published by the National Security Council of Iran. And in particular, of course, there was a little bit of spin surrounding that, which was that these 10 points that were given to the Americans had been agreed by the Americans, as if that was an agreement by the Americans that enrichment was fine, that they were going to withdraw from the whole of West Asia, and indeed that the Iranians and the Iranians would control the Strait of Hormuz and charge money, $2 million per ship, to get through it. Now, none of that was actually apparently given to the Americans. It was pretended that it was given to the Americans. And of course, the Americans had only agreed, if they'd agreed anything, to use that as the basis for a negotiation, while they had their own points which they wanted to bring in. So it was used to sell to the Iranian people that there was more of a concession from the US than in fact there was. It was used to say that actually the US won't be dealing and won't be discussing the missiles with us. Well, of course, that's not what the Americans thought. And of course, that's not what the Americans intended. And of course, in relation to Lebanon, there was a red line put over Lebanon, and then the Zionists did what Steve's been talking about, the 100 bombs in 10 minutes, and the Iranians threatened not to go. And then Trump said, oh, well, Bibi will stop now. And Bibi didn't stop, and they still went. So that's been a really very difficult situation. And of course, the Lebanese government, acting as a proxy for the US, and effectively as tame lapdogs for the Zionists, have come out with this thing about, oh, well, we're a sovereign country, we're going to negotiate with the Zionists. Well, that was never going to be happening. And of course, the point of that was to make sure that they could decouple Hezbollah from the Islamic Republic of Iran, which was a key strategy to pick people off and destroy them individually. So that's been a bit of a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, and this latest incursion into Lebanon, I mean, it's clearly a part of the Zionist plan to create the so-called Greater Israel, isn't it?
Well, yes, of course it is. I mean, the people used to say, "Oh, the Greater Israel, that's just a conspiracy theory," but now everyone sees that that's what they're trying to do, and everyone's seen that the fact that they're now occupying large new parts of the south of Syria, and they're trying to move back up to the Litani, and if possible beyond the Litani in Lebanon. Now, they tried it last year and they were beaten back by Hezbollah. They still have, I think, 10 different parts of Lebanon which are posts just over what would be the border on points of high ground, but they're now trying to move further than that. They said in the last day that they will be taking Ben Jamil, which is just over the border. I mean, if you look at the maps, really very, very close to the border. But of course, they've been failing to do that. Now, of course, Hezbollah have, as they've been saying, adopted new tactics and techniques as a result of the pager attack and the compromises that the Zionist intelligence apparatus clearly made to some elements of Hezbollah's intelligence gathering and security. And that new way of operating, directed, it seems, by the new Secretary General of Hezbollah named Qassam, has actually meant that the Zionists don't know what's hitting them. And not only have they destroyed huge numbers of Merkava tanks in the last few weeks, but even in the battle now that's happening on the border, the Zionists have been pushed back and harried at every turn.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, Steve, finally, and probably briefly, despite the devastating nature of Israel's genocidal campaign in Lebanon, I mean, they haven't actually succeeded in occupying Lebanese land, have they? I mean, why do you think that is?
The people of Lebanon have a deep connection to their land. The people of Lebanon, they're a people of resistance. They're a people of resilience. And as David was talking about just now, that the resistance, I think, surprised Israel. They'd spent 15 months striking what they said were Hezbollah targets, Hezbollah munitions storage facilities, Hezbollah taking out Hezbollah fighters or their commanders. They said they'd eliminated the Radwan force, that they'd in these kind of daily attacks. So they thought that they were simply going to walk in, which obviously they haven't. As David pointed out, the Merkava tanks are going up in flames. They're inflicting Hezbollah's inflicting very heavy blows against the Israelis. Their soldiers are now, we always joke when we hear this, there has been a troubling incident in the south, which is what the Israelis called it, which means that they're using helicopters to evacuate dead or wounded soldiers. So taking land isn't the same as holding land. And if you look at any kind of military strategy, they would need something like 80,000 troops to hold an area south of the Litani River. They would be taking some very, very big hits and big casualties in doing so. So they can't really. Israel's never really been able to fight a ground war. It's tried many times, and each time it's been pushed back. And Hezbollah is using these kind of guerrilla tactics, and they know the land incredibly well because it's their land. They belong to the land. They belong to the people. So they know the terrain very, very well. So they've built these second and third line defenses that they've dug in for decades. So I think that's really why Israel can't take the land. We have a saying in Lebanon that Israel controls the skies, but the people in the resistance control the land. And I think, that's what we're seeing being played out here. And you're seeing it also in the noises now coming out of Israeli military figures that are saying, well, now that we're not going to take that area south of the Litani, they're talking about 6 to 8 kilometers a security buffer zone. And that's because they probably couldn't even hold that, to be perfectly honest with you. But the people will continue to resist the Israeli invaders for sure.
On that note, Steve, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. So I'd like to thank you, Steve Sweeney, as our guest today, and of course our resident expert, David Miller. If you want to support the show, you can follow us on X, Facebook, Rumble, and Telegram, where we post regular clips and updates. And if you want to see us continue standing up for Palestine and exposing the Zionist colony, please consider donating to our fighting fund. In the meantime, make a date to join us again next week when I'll be back alongside David Miller with more exclusive content that you will not find in the corporate media. So until then, this is Chris Williamson saying bye for now.